Hi everyone, my name is Tiniade Broughton. I'm the chair of the CRA, a council member representing District 5. You have me doing so much, so I have to remember. So thank you all for coming out tonight. You can hear me? Okay, thank you all for coming out tonight. But more than anything, I want to thank you for these months and months of community input that everyone from UDA, what's the official name of it?
Urban Design Associates.
That Urban Design Associates went through to get everyone's participation. And whether you responded to a survey through online, or you attended one of these earlier, or you sent an email, and I definitely got your email, to let you know your ideas. It's bringing us together and sharing ideas in what is now going to be a shared space for all of us. At one point in time, this was relegated to an afterthought of the city, right? It was forgotten about. It was how you were to get from point A through downtown, through the city to downtown, which was the destination. And so now we're making this in such a way to make you want to stop through, and whether it be you live there, play there, work there, but the opportunity for everyone to participate and everyone to experience Pensacola. In an effort to make the city better, it's going to take all of us. And all of us are here to give our input, to appreciate the history and heritage of the community, to talk about the possibility of the future. And I want to thank you all for participating in that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman and Chairperson. So I'm Megan with Urban Design Associates, and we actually have a whole team that is working with us. We have Yvette Mangalo-Winston, who's in the back with Monwin Consulting. We have Alan and Corey with HDR. We've had James Lima, Planning and Development, looking at the market. And so this is coming towards the end, and we're so thrilled that this is a full room tonight because, like the council person said, your voices have been what is driving this plan all the way through. And I'm going to stand over here. Last time we were here, we didn't have this railing, so I apologize that there's a little bit of a shadow on the slides there. But we also want to acknowledge that the CRA staff has been working tirelessly on this plan. Victoria and Hillary and Shirley are here this evening, and Rachel and Tiffany, you may have received invitations or flyers or seen the social media. This team is dedicated to making sure that these plans actually reflect what you would like to see happen, because it's their charge. I mean, they're public servants, and they are going to use these plans to fund projects to make these CRA districts better. So it is important to understand what the CRA does. The CRA expands housing options, preserves character and history and culture, builds equity, strengthens neighborhood identities. We're going to talk about that. Foster economic development, sustainability, walkability, bikeability, transit, and parking. We've heard so much about how people want to be able to walk, but it's not safe or comfortable. And it's about connecting people to the assets like the waterfront. The existing urban core, east side and west side plans are all at least 15 years old. The best case or the best practice for updating these plans is every 5 years. So this is long overdue. And it was a big undertaking to try to do all 3 plans at one time. It is a large area, when you really look at how much is going on. And the residents and the business owners and the nonprofits and the community organizations, your voices have given us all of the content that you see around the room and you see on these slides, and tonight is our opportunity to continue to refine it. So this has been a 4-step process. We started with just listening and understanding what things are like today. And then in the summer and fall, we tested some concepts. So you said, I would like to see improved walkability on Cervantes Street. So we looked at what the options were. And things were still pretty early at that point. And now we're in the refinement stage. What's actually feasible? What's most important to you? So we're trying to refine and understand the feasibility. And then after this step, we're going to move into adoption of the plan, which will include adoption by the CRA board and then eventually by council. So a lot has happened so far. Back in May, we had our first kickoff. We were here in this room, and we did a meeting for each of the 3 CRA districts. And then we did a virtual version of that for folks who weren't able to join. There was an interactive map that you could go and put pins in. Some of you may have done that, and we got thousands of data points from these engagements. The CRA did pop-up engagement. If you came to conversation, what was it? Vibes and conversation, conversations and vibes, conversation and pizza over the summer, and we had great turnout for those, lots of ideas. In September, we had a live workshop in this space. We had illustrators, and we were exploring and drawing those ideas. And then in October and November, there was a survey with a lot of those ideas where you could tell us whether you thought they would benefit the CRA districts and additional thoughts. And then between November and January, we've been refining and actually creating the draft plans. So what you see around the room and in this presentation tonight is a snapshot of what is in the draft plan. And we're going to refine it further based on what you tell us and what the city departments say and the elected officials. And then we have this workshop, February workshop 3. So who's engaged so far? In the first listening step, we had in-person meetings, online meetings, interactive maps, stakeholder groups, pop-up neighborhood workshops, youth events, and we got over 2,000 comments. So that is, we think, a really good basis for starting to document the community's vision. And then that second survey that we did after the workshop, so this was in October and November, almost 200 people responded. And over 50% of the participants actually live in the CRA. So we know a lot of people come to downtown, they go through the CRA, but over half the people responding to that survey actually are CRA residents. And some of them were seeing things for the first time. So when we talk about the big picture, and again, I apologize for the shadow there, but our team has been trying to understand, when you say that you want connectivity, we need to understand what streets would you be able to walk and bike on all the way through the district. So one example is Gonzalez Street. There's a concept for a shareway. Another east-west connector is Wright Street. You can go almost all the way from the west side of West Side all the way through urban core on Wright Street. Then we have some bigger streets like Garden and Government and Main Street, where the city has been thinking about building multi-use paths and making sure that the connectivity is safe for walking and biking. We know that some of these streets are FDOT streets. They're state streets that are owned and maintained by the state. That means we have to work with FDOT, which our team has been doing, and thinking about how we get people across with intersection improvements so that those barriers can be broken down. And then there's also a whole effort for trail connectivity. There will be a new trail in Hollis T. Williams Park. The Sun Trail will run kind of along the waterfront and along Main Street. There's a concept of Gregory Street having a path. You'll hear about a new multi-use trail, and then we also know that the Bluff Trail is another effort that's in development. So these plans that we're putting together and the information that you see around the room have two components. They have recommendations organized by topics, and there's 6 topics: land use, zoning, and districts, economic development, neighborhood development, housing, open space and amenities, and transportation, streets, and parking. So when you see the boards that have lots of text on them, you're going to be reading recommendations in these areas. So it really encompasses and incorporates quite a wide range of things, from affordable housing to multimodal walking and biking improvements, commercial improvements, and infill development. And then you're going to see what we're calling special demonstration projects. These are where the magic happens. The special demonstration projects for each area, they blend together investments in all 6 of those areas and say, we're going to do some street investments, we're going to attract some private investment, and we're actually going to transform a corridor or an area of the city. So this is where we've drawn what it looks like today, and if all of this investment happened, what it could look like in the future. These demonstration projects are in pretty visible locations, like for instance, around the Bay Center near Wright and Alkanese, right? Everyone knows that that's a challenging area where there's a disconnected walking network. These are projects where some public investment will actually catalyze private investment. So we're thinking about how both the public sector and the private sector come together, and then they demonstrate how these plan recommendations can actually make the plan recommendations in the 6 areas come together to transform. There are some recommendations at the very beginning of the room over here that apply to all of the CRA districts. So we pulled out just a couple of these in the neighborhood development category. So one example is community policing. This is something that the CRA is able to fund with the funds that come from the TIF districts. And there's lots of different ways to think about community policing. You could have increased patrols. You could also work with the police department to do best practices such as bicycle patrols, community outreach events, getting to know folks in the neighborhood. And you could also fund community ambassadors or outreach team members. These are 2 outreach team members at a park. And their job is just to get to know people who come to the park and make sure everyone's having a good time and to build relationships with youth. Another example of a recommendation that would apply to all 3 areas would be helping neighborhood organizations build their capacity. So that would mean that when we have a plan, we want the neighborhoods to help implement it. We want the neighborhoods to stay in touch with residents and encourage all of you to come to meetings like this and stay informed, and also to advocate for specific things in your neighborhoods that you want to see happen. After this plan, which is high level, there may be an opportunity for neighborhoods to develop or update individual neighborhood plans to look at more detail for certain projects or programming, arts and humanities, things that the CRA can't do, or to really define your neighborhood character. When we say Old East Hill, what does that mean? When we say Garden District, what does that mean? What is the scale and character and architecture of your neighborhood that you want to continue? Another idea that could come out of this plan and additional grant funding would be to help neighborhoods create a logo and a brand and an identity that demonstrate how unique and special each neighborhood is. So I love this poster. This is Chicago, and every single neighborhood has an identity and a logo, and then they've made this poster with all of the different neighborhoods. So this is something that coming out of this plan, neighborhoods could really run with it and develop your own identity, and then that could be put on gateway signs, on banners, and other placemaking elements, because we know your neighborhoods are special, and that should come through in the physical environment. So we're gonna walk through some of these concepts for each district, starting with the East Side CRA, and branching off of that idea of what's unique. These neighborhoods in these CRA districts are actually quite different from one another, and we think there's some really special things about each one. In the East Side CRA, you have amazing history and culture, significant African American leaders who lived there, who were from the East Side, the history of the lost neighborhood, and an understanding of what happened there. You have cultural leaders and advocates in your neighborhood today who are working for change, active parks, and community centers that are truly the heart of this district. And you have these cultural landmarks, Chappie James Museum, Spencer Bibbs, Cobb Center, McGee Field, H&O Cafe. It's just a really rich place. You have an African American history trail, and I probably got the name wrong, but we'll get that right. But the neighborhood has a lot to offer, and I think that this CRA plan wants to build on that and help enhance and celebrate it. So we have a framework of important east-west streets and north-south streets, and these orange bubbles kind of show that we're going to look at a concept for the area around Spencer Bibbs. We're going to look at gateways potentially, especially coming into the new Hollis T. Williams Park, which is being improved, and think about east-west connections like a trail along Blunt Street and potentially Gonzalez Street turning into kind of a bike highway or a bike shareway, and we want people to be able to move freely through the district and see and enjoy all of these great things. So the city has studied previously taking MLK and Davis and changing them from one way to two ways. These were the ingress and egress into the city before I-110 was built. And so the fact that Davis is named Davis Highway, it was intended to be a highway in and out. But the East Side neighborhood is divided by that fast-moving traffic, and then it was further divided when I-110 was built. So you have this incredibly precious neighborhood being divided by fast-moving traffic. Then after the highway was built, they were left as one-way streets. And people fly along Davis and MLK, and it really makes the neighborhood less safe to walk and bike. This is important because when we improve Hollis T. Williams Park, and it's this destination, we want people in East Side to be able to get there as easily and safely as everyone else. So there's a couple of examples, this is in New Albany, Indiana. I don't know where that is, but this was a similar scale one-way street that was changed into a two-way street. You still have the parking, you still have bike lanes, but the traffic's just going two directions. And what happened is the speeds came down, so people stopped driving as fast. It also allowed walking and biking and crossing the street to happen more easily, and the streets work better for police and fire because they have more options on how to get to each property. They don't have to go around in a big circle. So generally, when the streets change to two-way, it improves the safety in the neighborhood. So on MLK Drive today, you have two lanes. Well, let's see, what am I looking at here? Well, today's at the bottom and tomorrow's at the top. But if you were to change to two ways, we also think that's not enough. We think that you need to have wider sidewalks, that you should have trees so that it's shaded, and that you should have nice signs and banners and light posts. So this is one option for keeping parking on both sides, creating a couple of bump outs at the end of blocks to put trees in, and hopefully widening your sidewalks on one side or both sides so that this can become a neighborhood street. And the same with Davis. Last time that we were here, we showed a version that did not have the bicycle lane, and we heard loud and clear, people like the bicycle lane. So we've looked at a different option, and that would be to create a little bit of protection for the bike lane with the plastic bollards so that the people who are riding there feel more safe and more comfortable. And then similarly, in between parking spaces, can you create a couple of bump outs so that there's some shade and comfort for walking along Davis Street. This is one of my favorite ideas that grew out of the workshop. Around Spencer Bibbs, everyone knows the Crystal Ice House, right? What a gem and a special piece of history. There's a concept, and the CRA is looking at working with the school district to use the 20-car parking lot that's just north of this to create an incubator market for East Side businesses and restaurateurs and chefs and makers and artisans. And the idea would be to reactivate the Crystal Ice House, turn it into an ice cream shop or a snow cone shop, create an outdoor pavilion with some picnic tables and seating, and then a few small kiosks. I mean, you could pull up food trucks, but you could also have vendors have sort of 3-season or 4-season small kiosks that have power, that have water, and can operate a small business. And we just think even before Hollis T. Williams Park gets improved, this would be a place for East Side to come together to celebrate this beautiful place, and that there could be a support system for those small businesses so that they can succeed and start to build community wealth. Back in the summer and fall, there was an effort, because there will be a significant amount of investment in Hollis T. Williams Park, to think about making sure that that investment benefits the people who live in the area around the park and does not have negative impacts. So the city went down a process of developing an equitable development framework plan. It's a lot of words, but it basically just means that there are some values and principles in place that will be followed by strategies to help people benefit from the park. So that might include the creation of jobs. It might include supporting small businesses and entrepreneurship. It means celebrating the history and culture, making sure that the park is programmed and designed in a way that makes people feel comfortable. And this was adopted earlier in the fall, so you can sort of see the values there. And the one that's blacked out is housing affordability. So when you go around the room, there's lots more to absorb, but those are kind of the big ideas. There's also recommendations that we'll talk about to look at and explore expanding the east side CRA boundary. That's something that the Neighborhood Association has been interested in, and it's also something that would help generate additional TIF dollars, but there's a legal process for doing that. The CRA could develop design standards to make sure that new development fits the scale and the character of East Side and it doesn't detract from the historic homes. You could use incentives to build new affordable housing, make sure that stormwater and drainage is addressed. Those east-west connections, we want people to be able to get to Hollis T. Williams Park, and you could look at Haynes Street becoming two ways. So you can read on the boards, East Side is over here, lots of detailed recommendations, and we want to hear whether you like the ideas and what your thoughts are. So this is a map here, and there's been some proposals. The Neighborhood Association is interested in the dashed boundary. The heavy boundary is actually the City of Pensacola, so that's the extent that the CRA expansion could go. And we've just looked at a large umbrella of area and recommended that the CRA move into a process following these plans to explore expanding the boundaries. And there will need to be demographic analysis and market analysis and property value analysis. But we think if these boundaries could get bigger, that there could be more dollars generated to implement and create the ideas that are in the update plans. So moving on to urban core. You know, urban core is a different but also a very unique and special place. You have all of the historic architecture from the first settlement, the commercial core, the beautiful Palafox Street. You have a strong arts community, and you have year-round programming. I mean, this is the cultural heart of Pensacola. You have this active, pedestrian-friendly waterfront where the stadium area, Community Maritime Park, Bruce Beach, all of these investments that have happened along your waterfront. And then you have amazing parks and plazas that are really beautiful with old trees, and you have some more recent investments with Blake Doyle Skate Park. So we're going to look at a couple of areas. One of those areas is, I mentioned the Wright and Alkanese area. You have the Grand Hotel, which has been a little bit of a challenge. You have the area around the Bay Center, Technology Park, and everyone has just told us, we can't walk through this area. I would walk to work if I could get through this area. It's not safe to come down Alkanese, and it's not safe to go down 9th Street. We'll also look at the area by Palafox Pier and Cedar Street and talk about some of the east-west connectivity. But before we go into the heart of downtown, we have a set of recommendations for Belmont de Villiers. Again, one of those very historically significant areas, you know, jazz, entertainment, African-American history and culture, and there's opportunities to build more infill housing. So you have some vacant lots. It would be nice if that district had more of a 24/7 presence, you know, more people to support the small businesses and the restaurants. And those new uses could have ground floor retail that are related to arts and entertainment, additional cafes and restaurants and things to do. And then there's an opportunity to really celebrate the history and the culture of the district. So this is the view at Wire Park along Belmont Street, and there's a parking lot that many of you, I'm sure, have seen and parked in. There could be an opportunity to build, like we said, mixed use housing and retail, additional housing down along Wright Street, and then there are a few retail infill spaces in the core of Belmont de Villiers. So here's what that could look like with a new mixed-use building with housing, maybe a music-related ground floor like a recording studio or a record shop facing out onto the park. Some folks may know the state-owned parking lot. This is at Roos and De Villiers and Romana Street. It's really not well used, and there would be an opportunity to look at a couple of options for housing, stormwater mitigation, keeping some parking and retail, or a larger residential development. So we'd like to hear thoughts about bringing more neighborhood residential. Here's the area around the Bay Center, and you can see that what's being proposed here is really taming some of these streets. We may not need 5, 6 lanes in a lot of places, and that may allow us to create more wider pedestrian areas, make sure that our intersections are crossable. You know, we want kids and adults to be able to walk to and from Hollis T. Williams and the skate park into town, and there may be an opportunity where we have a dead end here because of all of the ramps to actually carve out a pedestrian pathway through some of the ramps so that you could walk from Gregory downtown all the way to the center, the main entry of the Bay Center. The Grand Hotel and the Depot Station, we don't know what's going to happen with this building, but we think it deserves a deeper dive and a deeper look at this whole area. You know, the building may be able to be renovated. It may need to come down. There may be options for the Bay Center. We have the technology park sites. The recommendation is for this whole area to have a holistic plan and a deeper dive done to look at how it could become developed and walkable and create an asset and add something to downtown that people would like to see. So we mentioned Alkanese, enhancing the crosswalks, maybe reducing the lanes of traffic, adding on-street parking, maybe we add a median, and make sure that we have shared use paths for pedestrians and bicyclists in both directions. And then a similar strategy on Wright Street so that some of those small retail buildings can actually receive active uses and businesses can locate there. So folks, who's familiar with the hashtag connector? Is that a term that people know? Okay, some people know that. In the city's waterfront plan, there's this concept of Cedar and Main Street, Palafox and Jefferson, creating like a hashtag shape. And the idea here is that if we can make those 4 streets walkable and bikeable and put active uses on them, that you'll start to pull some of the energy from Palafox Street south of Main Street. So Cedar is actually an important part of that. The concept here is to have a curbless shared street, so cars can go on it, but it really feels more like a European street where people walk, and to bring more restaurants and shops south of Main Street and have another destination, almost like a micro retail destination. And then as you look further down Palafox Pier, there'll be an opportunity for the city to build public parking, parking decks, to put retail and restaurants along Cedar, to do some infill retail along Palafox Pier, and then to make the pier itself more family friendly. So today you have cars that ring around the fountain, and we're proposing that maybe there's more access to the water there. Maybe you could have kayaks or paddle boats or dinner cruises leaving from there, and that space could be slightly reconfigured so that it's safe for kids to run around and a nice place for people to be. So we're on Cedar Street and we're looking east, and you can see that there's some vacant lots, there's some parking lots, and then in the future, that curbless street, curbless space where cars can drive down it, but it's really intended for people, and you've got outdoor dining and small retail. So in the urban core, there's many other recommendations, but the city is building the Sun Trail. There's lots of opportunities for trailheads and connections. We've talked about the Community Cultural Center at Bruce Beach. That's planned as phase 3 of Bruce Beach. There are key intersections. We know that there are streets like Cervantes Street and Garden Street and 9th Street that are huge barriers, and so we need intersection improvements so that people can get across safely. And then some neighborhoods have this unique identity, but other neighborhoods could develop that unique identity and really start to express and do some placemaking. So the last district, we have West Side. West Side I think, is one of the places that I've grown to love. You know, you have these historic cemeteries, you have these community centers and parks that are really well loved and well used, amazing ethnic businesses and restaurants, many of whom don't have a great setting. You know, they're making a go at it on Cervantes Street with fast traffic moving past, but they're just packed because people love these places. You've got a pretty interesting district happening along Barrancas Avenue. You know, businesses are opening there, even though, again, it's not a great environment. And then you've got nice tree-lined trees and oak trees. We're going to take a look at the Cervantes Street area and then look at Barrancas. But I just want to point out that Baptist Hospital has been a point of discussion and an opportunity that folks realize for a long time. And the city is doing due diligence right now on understanding the feasibility of demolition and renovation, and they're going to select a contractor soon. Some or all of the buildings will be demolished, but the next step is to hire a consultant to advise and guide the city in the development process. And the envisioned uses are mixed use, mixed income housing with education anchors. So that's kind of the big picture, that it should be a mixed use place. It should serve people of all incomes. We should work with health providers and with education providers to make sure that it brings assets to the community. And the community conversations are going to start before any demo begins. So that's sort of what's happening with Baptist. Again, it needs its own process because it's a big site and it deserves that time and attention, but you all will be invited to that conversation. So looking at Cervantes Street. Cervantes Street is a state-owned road, which limits what can be done, but we heard over and over and over again, it's not safe, it's not comfortable, I can't cross the street, I can't walk along the street. So we explored an idea that looked at taking Cervantes Street from 5 lanes of traffic, I think, 4 lanes of traffic in each direction, down to 1 in each direction with a turn lane. This would require a lot of additional study. We'd have to work with FDOT, we'd have to understand what the traffic impacts are, but we were just curious. We said, let's throw it out and see what people think. And we're curious to hear what you think. We've heard both. We've heard, you know, there's too much traffic, that could never happen, but we've also heard something really has to be done here, because it separates neighborhoods, it's impossible to cross. So we're interested to hear what you think about Cervantes Street and what should happen to it. Baptist that we talked about is directly up E Street. So there is an opportunity to create a gateway at Cervantes and E. You're going to have a lot of people driving north to Baptist when it's redeveloped, and we would love to see an ethnic food incubator or a hub there. You could have small spaces for restaurants. You could, again, support those businesses and the entrepreneurship. The Gibson School here, you have a historic portion of the school. We looked at that as a business or an education incubator and potentially looking at additional housing. And there's been a desire, we heard it, to attract a grocer to the west side. Everyone says yes. Everyone wants a grocery. It's challenging, right, because the grocers have very strict rules for where they will go and where they won't. But if you are planning for a grocery, the best place to put it is as far to the east as possible, because you're going to capture better, higher incomes and more people, and that's what grocers are looking for. So it may be a long time in the future, but the city is thinking about maybe one of the blocks on Cervantes Street, you know, towards A Street, potentially in the future for attracting a grocer. So this is the historic Gibson School building. The school district currently owns this site. We're sort of showing how that could become a business incubator, and then you could build housing on that block and have a small gathering space. Okay, Barrancas. Pretty incredible what's happening at Barrancas. You've got brewery, you've got pizzeria, you have restaurants over there. It's really interesting that all of that's happening, and the street is pretty hostile. It's not really a place that we want to hang out. Now, whereas Cervantes is a state road, Barrancas is actually a city street. So you could take Barrancas from 2 lanes of traffic each way to 1 lane of traffic each way with parking and a center turn lane. with a little bit less of headache than you would have to on a state road. And then you have a number of parking lots or underutilized industrial properties along there that we think this will just happen. People will start to build housing. People will start to cluster other restaurants and entertainment uses around what's already happening. And we think it would be amazing to have a multi-use path on the south side of Barrancas that would eventually connect into the Sun Trail, and it would connect to the Superfund site where they're building a new park. So this is Barrancas today, and then in the future, you're looking at new housing, a small shop on the corner, a mixed-use path, trees, and then you have, 1 lane of moving traffic each direction and a center turn lane. Okay, the American Creosote Works site. This is the Superfund site. Everyone familiar with the site? Not very many people. Okay, just a few. So this is adjacent to the Sanders Beach neighborhood, and there's contamination on the site. The EPA is going through a cleanup, and the city is collaborating. And it's a very large parcel of land. So what will need to happen is that this area in the purple, further to the west, that's the containment area and the remediation area. They're going to need to mound it up and put basically a liner to protect and stop the contamination. So that's going to be a big hill. There'll be kind of a road that goes around it, and people can walk on the road when it's done. The second portion is that we do not want to cause the city, EPA, no one wants to see any flooding in the neighborhood or negative impact. So there's a large dry detention pond that's going to catch all of the stormwater runoff from that hill. The good news is that the remainder of the site over here in the green, that can be programmed as a community park. And this neighborhood, I think, deserves and has been dreaming about this park for a long time. So we showed some concepts in October. We had another meeting with the Sanders Beach neighborhood for them to share their visions. And the idea here is that there could be a trail along where Pine Street is today, no cars, just a walking, biking trail. There would be an entry into the park off of Gimble Street. We're showing a small parking lot that some days could become like a farmer's market or a place for outdoor festivals. And then we heard loud and clear that the idea is trees, native planting, a very peaceful and serene type of environment with pathways. Maybe there's some large lawn areas for, just pick-up recreation, but this is really about creating a quiet, beautiful, contemplative space with shade and benches for the folks in the neighborhood. And then the lumber yard is to the north along Main and Gimble. And in the future, again, 20-year vision, if that were to be relocated, you could develop housing and additional mixed-use retail on that site facing onto the park. So here's a vision of what Pine Street is today, and then in the future, a multi-use path along there. So for the west side, other recommendations, this idea of identifying districts and giving them an identity, I think would do the west side a great deal of good. It's a large area, but it doesn't have as many defined neighborhoods as urban core does, and then east side just has the single neighborhood. So historic Brownsville, the Barrancas and West Garden district, the Barrancas area that we just talked about, and the new areas at Baptist Hospital. There's some corridor redevelopment along Pace and Garden. I think that I heard this in some of the comments, community gardens could really benefit in the west side. And then safe streets for walking and biking. We're looking at Wright Street and Gregory Street, and then making sure at key intersections we can get across Garden, we can get across Cervantes, we can get across A Street. West side, just like the east side, could be considered for a boundary expansion to go to the city boundary. You can sort of see there's areas that have been excluded down to Bio Chico and others. This has to go through the same process of evaluating the finding of necessity to look at the demographics. This would not increase any taxes or have any negative impact on existing residents. You sort of wouldn't know, but including some of the industrial property in this area would generate more tax dollars in order to help fund the projects that we just talked about. So it doesn't have a negative impact on residential, but if you capture that commercial and industrial area, it generates tax dollars for projects. So that is one possible suggestion, and it would have to go through additional analysis. Okay, so what happens next? Tonight, we want you to go around and talk to the team members. There's a number of us here tonight. What recommendations do you support? What recommendations do you disagree with? What did we miss? I'm sure we missed something. There's a number of ways to stay engaged. You all found out about tonight's meeting, so hopefully you're on the mailing list. But there's a sign up on the website. The CRA is on Facebook and Instagram. And I apologize, this is the old survey. So where are we going next? We're going to go into adopting the plan, but tonight is a very important, critical turning point and an inflection point because we still have time to change things. We're going to be refining, we're going to be editing, and we're not going to finalize this plan for about another month. And so we want to hear from you tonight, and we want your input. We're going to be recording all of it and making sure that your voices are the ones that are guiding what happens next. So the team's going to be around the room. We want to answer all of your questions, and thank you so much for being here tonight.